Hello, hello, gamers. Let this Baldy tell you how it is. So, for those of you that don't know, I've been going to the gym every single day for a couple months now. It's always been kind of a low-key goal of mine to just do the constant working out every single day. I remember the only other time I ended up trying to attempt it was I tried to do a 30-day non-stop workout when I was a lot younger, and of course I ended up getting bored and didn't end up getting through it. That said, I have been the type of person that has consistently worked out. Only in the most recent years, like maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I ended up hitting the gym and starting to really build up a lot of muscle. I ended up kind of hitting my peak at one point, and generally speaking, ended up once again getting very, very bored with the subject. And so that's why today I'm going to kind of run you guys through how I've been able to push through that threshold and how I've been able to stay motivated throughout the entire experience. So first and foremost, it's definitely helped to have a goal. My goal right now is that I'm getting married in October. I want to look good for my wedding. It's as simple as that. And I know that because now I have that goal, it has made my motivation for going into the gym a whole lot easier. But it does mean that when we end up reaching that goal, I need to try and mentally come up with some new objective that's a little bit further down the line so that I can end up staying motivated. The other big difference between what I've been doing now and what I've been doing before is what I used to do was I've actually done all sorts of different body training. I've done crazy amounts of cardio in the past. And the one that ended up sticking with me for the longest was Strongman training, which is big ass compound lifts where you're lifting as heavy as you possibly can. I was able to push some of my numbers. I was doing like 300-pound squat, 400-pound deadlift and stuff like that. And after a while, that ended up getting boring as well. And more so than being boring, it was just really, really difficult, you know? Not only just to stay motivated to be able to lift that heavy because we're always, you know, I was always on the precipice of just giving up. But on top of all of that, it just wasn't really fun because the way that my body felt afterwards, I didn't feel like I was necessarily gaining strength. Now, that said, obviously I was gaining tons and tons of strength, and that's probably the strongest I've ever been in my life and probably the strongest I ever will be in my life. However, the difference is that what I'm doing now is I'm doing more bodybuilder training. So I'm doing aesthetic workouts to end up looking good rather than doing a full body workout that ends up making me entirely stronger. You know what I mean? The other thing too I gotta let you guys know about very clearly is because I'm working out every single day, recovery is very, very important. And so what I'm doing to compensate for the lack of a recovery day is I'm making sure that I end up tackling different muscle groups every single day. And so this way, I'm not going to overtax one specific muscle while it is in the period of rest time. Now, that said, you're going to notice that my workouts that I'm going to explain to you guys are quite contradictory. I do arm workouts almost every single day. But I'm just trying to say the importance of being able to kind of have a rest day. And what I end up doing is I kind of cheat a little bit. So when I do a rest day, certain muscles I try not to tackle. And on top of all of that, if I do end up tackling them, like doing arms almost every day, I end up lowering the weights considerably so that it's more of a burnout exercise rather than something that's going to end up pushing the muscle. And last but not least, if any of you guys watching at home have started working out because of my workout videos, I know I don't make these very often just because they're quite a chore to end up making a video like this because I gotta get a list of all the different workouts and stuff like that. But you gotta understand that this is a very, very slow process, okay? Not only just because of building up muscle can end up being very, very slow, especially for somebody like me where, like I said, I've already hit my peak before where my muscles are kind of at the point where it's very, very difficult for me to put on more mass, especially because I'm not overeating, because that's going to end up being one of the most important things to looking more aesthetic is that you're going to end up focusing on what you're eating. Now, to break down what I'm doing for my dieting right now is I'm actually just doing intermittent fasting where what that means is when I end up having my last meal of the night, I can't eat for 16 hours. So long as I end up just eating at a very specific time frame before I end up going to bed, usually that's okay. I've had maybe 2 days where I ate just before bed and it completely fucked me over for the next day because I was just starving because I couldn't wait. I needed to wait until I ended up hitting that 16 hours, which was a lot more difficult when my sleep time was so close to when I was waking up within that meal frame. But the other thing too is I'm more purposefully eating certain foods. So the only real difference with my diet right now is I've cut out eating candy and sugar and crap like that. Obviously I still have sugar in my diet with like fruits and so on and so forth. The other thing too is that I'm having a lot more vegetables. It's not like I'm going hardcore into eating properly and getting like a super 6-pack abs and losing all my body fat or anything like that. But in combination with the intermittent fasting, I think that I'm doing a pretty good job right now. Another thing that I have to add in is that I've been walking to the gym every single day. So that has definitely helped in terms of my cardio and just overall health. And that's going to end up being the biggest difference that you'll see from the before and after shot. So this is why I ended up looking like before. And generally speaking, it's not like I look bad or anything like that. But for myself personally, I'm going to end up being my harshest critic. And it's not at the point where I'm satisfied. Now, that said, most of all, I can notice that a lot of the issues that are going on right here in this picture is my body fat percentage is a little bit high. So when you are purposefully trying to end up building up real world strength and doing the strongman training, like I mentioned, you basically just eat like a truck. Like you're just eating constantly, because if you are working out at such a high level where you're lifting like 200, 300, 400 pounds, you're going to end up burning through those calories extremely fast. And so the only way that you can end up putting on more muscle is by lifting heavier. And the only way that you can lift heavier is by putting on more mass, which is why I would just basically eat as much as I would want to. And that's where the term fat strong ends up coming into play. But as I had mentioned, that's no longer my goal. My goal right now is I want to look more aesthetically pleasing. I want to end up getting my 6-pack back, because I used to actually have one way back in the day. But now if we end up looking at the after picture, this is what I look like now, which I think I look pretty good. Generally speaking, I'm still not 100% satisfied with where I'm at. I think that a lot of that is going to end up just kind of slowly adjusting over time. The biggest thing that you'll notice is, especially around my waist, I've lost a lot of fat. I notice it with my face as well. Just in general, I've kind of lost a little bit of body fat percentage in there. And because of it, it means that my muscles are starting to have a little bit more definition. On top of that, I'd say for me personally, the biggest differences that I haven't noticed in my past workouts versus what I'm doing now is my shoulders have so much more definition. I've never usually had that little curvature of the shoulder going into the bicep. But on top of that, my triceps are actually really, really big now, which, that's this one right here. It's a lot bigger than it's been in the past. And then generally speaking, my bicep is starting to end up having a little bit more definition at the peak. But generally speaking, you can still tell that I do have body fat percentage. And the difference of body fat percentage versus no body fat percentage is, well, something like this, where your body is going to end up looking a lot more visceral because the amount of body fat that is within the skin fibers is going to end up being lessened. Thus, you can see the muscle through the skin a lot more obviously. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it equates to actual strength, because you'll notice that a lot of scrawny guys will actually look like they're extremely ripped, and that's because of the low body fat percentage. I know this from experience because when I was a lot younger and before I ended up putting on the pounds and putting on the mass, I would just do like very basic like push-ups and sit-ups and stuff, and I looked fantastic. I ended up having like full-on 6-pack abs that people always complimented me on when I was younger. And generally speaking, I didn't really I know that I'm a lot stronger now than I was back then, but because I had a lot less body fat percentage, it looked like I was a lot stronger. Bixby, record my screen. Record my screen. I gotta say, man, I fucking hate Bixby. It's so goddamn stupid. Anyways, enough of that, guys. Let's get into the actual workouts. So I'm actually using an app called My Workout Plan now. Generally speaking, I'd say that this app is not for beginners. It does have a method of charging you a subscription fee, which means that I'm obviously not going to end up doing that. But the free option is going to end up being very nice. The only difference is that if you subscribed to using the app, you would be able to add in your own custom images for workouts, which would be awesome. But I might have to try and find a torrent of this app, because I ain't paying no monthly fee, god damn it. So essentially I've got 6 different days of workouts that are going to end up basically just repeating over and over again. First, we start out with the chest, which is going to end up being a dumbbell bench press. The only difference is that I'm going to end up doing this on the floor, and then otherwise I'm going to be showing you guys these are all the sets and the weights that I'm going to end up using. Then we move to a dumbbell incline bench press, and I try my best not to put the bench over 35 degrees, and I found that it's going to end up hitting the upper delt a lot better. Then we've got an assisted, well, it says assisted chest dip, but that's just because it's the only way that I can program it into this app. Otherwise, again, I am not doing this assisted at all. So then what I've done with this app is I put purple as an exercise that is optional. So that really depends how I'm feeling on the day, or if the exercise is not preoccupied with somebody else in the machine or whatever, right? So then we end up doing an actual proper barbell bench press. The only difference is, again, I'm doing this on the floor, and then we end up doing a dumbbell lying hammer press. This is going to end up being really, really good for chest activation. But again, these are optional. So it's like I can either do one or the other, or just skip them entirely if I'm not feeling it the day of. So this picture is actually incorrect. The exercise in question that I'm trying to do is, maybe it's called the cable standing fly, but basically it's going to end up being for the lower chest, where this is like the starting position, and then you push down and cross your body with your arms. That's the reason why we do it in the cable machine. And so that's going to end up hitting this lower area here on the chest. But then we superset that with a cable crossover variation, which again, the image is a little bit incorrect. This exercise generally is going to seem really stupid, where you kind of have it like this. You grab with your other hand to support, and it's just a very, very easy movement like that. But if you have the weights at a high enough level, you will notice that you feel it very, very much in your pecs. Then we end up doing a face pull, not a band face pull. I do end up using the cable machine for this, as you can see with the 50 pounds. And the difference is that we're not going to end up doing this exercise like everybody else does, like an idiot. We're actually going to be doing an underhanded grip, and so we're going to end up grabbing the cables, and this is the end goal of the face pull, rather than doing something like this, which is going to end up hitting that shoulder rotation to a very, very negative effect. And then even though it's chest day, like I said, I've got some extra workouts here. So I've got an incline waiter curl with a triple pulse. So basically that's going to end up being the same as a spider curl, where you're leaning forward on the actual bench. But a waiter curl is quite literally holding the dumbbell like it's a waiter holding a tray, right? And the 3 pulse that I mentioned is because you go up and then you do 1, 2, 3, go back down, right? And then that's going to end up being 1 rep. And then we end up doing, you know, just a normal tricep dip from the back. The only difference, again, is that you want your hands in this position rather than in this position because of that shoulder external rotation. And that's going to end up having the same pulse thing where you go up and then it's 1, 2, 3, and then back down. And then that's going to end up being a rep. And then we end up doing a cable bar lat pull down, just as an extra, even though it's not necessarily lat day or anything like that. And then one of the biggest differences between the exercises that I told you guys 90 days ago and the exercises I'm doing now is I have an ab exercise at the end of every set. So we're going to end up doing a side bridge twist. However, the way that I'm going to do this is slightly different, because our starting position is going to be one arm like this, the other arm on top, and essentially we're going to end up lifting ourselves sideways, then we're going to hip thrust up, and then we bring it back down and go back to that, and that's going to end up being the starting position. We're going to end up doing the 10 reps on both sides. Oh my God, it's a hot day. I'm already starting to sweat just by doing this video because all these freaking lights on me. So next we've got back or upper lats, which is going to end up starting with a dumbbell bent over row. And then we're going to end up going right into a barbell bent over row with 45 pounds on either side, right? That's what it means by 45 times 1, is just so that it's easier for my brain so that I don't have to calculate or deal with any math. And this is when we're doing the real cable bar lat pull down, because we're doing it at 110 pounds instead of the 100 that we were doing the other day. Doing a couple pull-ups with a neutral grip and focusing on not having our body rocking around as we're jumping into it or anything. This is going to end up being slow and controlled, as is with every workout actually. And then again, we've got some purple exercises, which means that these are optional. Generally speaking, we're going to tackle at least one of these during this day, which is going to end up either being the barbell shrug, which is highly dependent on whether someone's in the barbell machine, or we're going to end up doing a cable shrug. Then again, we've got a normal face pull, not a band face pull, as I'd mentioned previously. And for a few extra, we've got a cable curl for the bicep, and it's going to be supersetted with an overhead tricep extension. And then for the abs on the day, we end up doing a levitation crunch, which is essentially going to end up being the same as a normal crunch. But the difference is that what I've learned is, while normally it's an instinct to end up doing a crunch where you kind of grab behind your neck and you pull your head between your legs, you don't actually have to do that because the abs themselves don't end up going that far. And so a lot of that exercise is actually performed wrong. So why we call it a levitation crunch is because you're essentially going to end up being in this starting position. All you have to do is very, very purposefully lifting with your abs, get your shoulder blades off of the ground. And you'll notice that that's going to end up having much more activation for your core than doing the rest of the movement that everybody else normally does. So then we've got an arm day. So we do dumbbell alternating bicep curls. These are going to end up being quite weird because essentially we're going to end up doing either a hammer curl or we can end up doing a full weird twisted curl like this. And the point of that when we're doing the standing curl is that that's going to end up hitting the width of the bicep rather than going to end up hitting the peak or the other muscles. Then we got a dumbbell incline bicep curl, which this again, you know, the biggest tip that I can give you guys for bicep activation is focusing on the stretch. So the most important thing is that part right there, the full range of motion back down, which you have to be very, very careful with the weights that you end up lifting. Lots of people, especially with their biceps, do what we call ego lifting, where they lift way too heavy. Generally speaking, the way that you can tell if you are at the precipice of the weight that you should be lifting versus the weight that you can be lifting is take a weight, and if you can stop at any specific point in the movement, that's how you know you've got the weight that is going to end up being good for activation. Because another thing that a lot of people will end up mentioning when working out is working out until failure. Now, what a lot of people consider this is that you're working out until you can't anymore. But the actuality is what failure normally is considered is as soon as you end up, compromising your form. Because form is going to end up being the most important thing to an actual workout. So as soon as you compromise your form, that is actual failure. But you'll see people jerking around with curls where they just throw it up and down and just, there's too much ego around the curls, man, versus doing it slow and controlled and with less weight. Anyways, then we go on to the bench in the other direction where we end up doing a dumbbell reverse spider curl. And speaking of dropping the ego, we're only doing this at 10 pounds, which by the time we've done all of the other exercises and doing them slow and controlled is going to end up making more of a difference than you would think. And then we end up doing a chin up. I'm not at the point where I can end up doing more than 6 in a set. And on top of all of that, I'm also not at the point where I can end up doing weighted chin ups. I'm trying to get there, but it's been a very difficult road. So then our biceps get a bit of a break as we move into the triceps. So we're going to do a dumbbell standing kickback and then a rocking cable push down. So this is going to end up being essentially the same as a cable push down, but the difference is that the resistance of the cable is going to end up being at its least amount when you're down in this position. And so that's why you essentially are going to rock back and forth while you're doing the exercise, and essentially that's going to end up keeping the resistance of the cable throughout the entire exercise. So then once again, these are going to end up being purple, but generally speaking, I have done these every single workout, which is going to end up being a superset of a barbell close grip bench with 25 pounds on either side. And then we end up supersetting that with a dumbbell lying tricep extension, pretty much on the exact same bench with the barbell right in front of my face. And then we got one last super duper set where we end up doing an easy barbell curl. This one is going to end up being against the wall. So what you'll notice is if you end up going against the wall, you make sure that your butt and your shoulders are going to be flat up against the wall, and that's going to end up forcing you into more of an activation than you would think. The other thing that you're going to try and do is with the easy barbell curl, you're actually not going to be grabbing it like this, which does feel more natural, I know. You're actually going to be grabbing it like this with a super hyper extension, which is going to be very, very uncomfortable. But my God, it really does affect the bicep a lot more than you would think. And in a lot of ways, the best part about it is that because of that supination, it's going to end up forcing your elbows in front of your body when you end up getting to the highest point of the lift, which is going to end up forcing more of the lift to be done by the bicep rather rather than being done by the shoulder. So right after the easy barbell curl, we end up going into a standing waiter curl, which I already mentioned before is just quite literally lifting it as if it's a waiter lifting a tray, right? This is going to end up being your burnout exercise because you're going to end up being pretty fatigued from the easy bar curl first. And then just for the sake of saving time, we're doing a cable standing shoulder external rotation. So I'm not used to doing these external rotation exercises. However, I have noticed that it does end up hitting my shoulder in a way that I've never felt before, in a good way. Yeah, you definitely want to add this to your arm day. And of course, last exercise for arm day is going to end up being a swiper crunch, where you are quite literally going to end up lifting with your abs to lift your butt in the air so that your tailbone gets off the ground. And then you kind of swipe your hands underneath your butt. That's why it's called a swiper crunch. And then you go back to square one. So then we finally are moving on to the next day, which is going to end up being shoulder day, which is both good and bad. Generally speaking, I do really like shoulder day now that I've been doing some proper activation, but at the same time, shoulders are very, very annoying. So we do a dumbbell standing alternate vertical front raise. These are going to end up being very, very focused. And again, you're not rocking your body or anything. You are doing it slow and controlled. Then we're going to be doing a cable lat raise, which as you can see, there's no picture for it. It's just quite literally going to end up being your starting position is slightly leaned forward and very, very over twisted with your body. And so this is the starting position and you're going to try and pull it back over and put it back into the starting position. And that nice stretch is really going to end up hitting your lats and your shoulders. Then we end up doing a rear delt row, which is a very, very weird one, but my God, this exercise, you should try it. It's fun and not fun at the same time. So you're basically just sitting down in the bench, slightly leaned forward, nice low dumbbells, and you kind of just start with your arms shrugged off to the side, and you're going up into this position and right back down. And that's it. Super duper quick and simple exercise, but it's going to end up hitting your shoulders and especially your neck in a way that you've never experienced. So then actually the optional here is going to end up being the standing military press. And so what we'll usually end up doing is either that supersetting into the next exercise, or frankly speaking, we'll just skip the military press for the day. It depends how I'm feeling, into a dumbbell standing overhead press. Then we can end up doing a butterfly overhead press, which quite literally you look like a butterfly. It really feels good for your ego because in this starting position with weights, you're going to really start to see the pump on your arm. But essentially you're going to do that and that's it. And then, oh my God, look at this. We're going to be doing a face pull again. It's not a band face pull. It's just going to end up being a normal face pull with the cable. Then we've actually got 2 ab workouts today. So we're going to end up doing a gymnast ab tuck, which this picture is wrong, but essentially it ends up getting the right point across, where you're going to end up being in the dip machine, whatever you want to call it. But essentially what you're going to be doing is you're going to be holding yourself in the dip position and you're going to be lifting kind of with your butt and twisting your abs. You want to try and keep your arms nice and straight. And then the extra one, which is a weird one, but a lot of fun, is going to end up being a farmer rock, where you hold a 45-pound on one side. And on top of all of that, you're going to be walking extremely slow. And the point of this exercise is stabilization, because you're trying to keep yourself straight up, but by walking slowly, it's going to force your imbalances because you're going to end up being on one foot and then on the other. And since you're basically walking in slow-mo, it's going to end up being a little bit more difficult than you would think. Then we've got leg day, which I finally think I've cracked the case. I absolutely hated leg day, because I used to do, as I mentioned, strongman training. And so it was just squatting like every day and doing all these huge, heavy compound lifts. And frankly speaking, my knees just can't take it anymore, man. Like almost every time I would end up doing leg day, my knees is what would end up hurting the following day rather than the actual muscle activation, which is not a good thing, because if I can feel it now, that means when I get older, I'm just going to end up not having legs. So anyways, we start with a barbell deadlift and we're just going to end up having it lower weight with a 45 and 35 on both sides. While this still says it's a barbell bench squat, that was when I was trying to figure out how I could end up doing leg day without hurting my knees. Generally speaking, I actually really hate the bench squat, which is basically going to be sitting down on a bench while you're doing your squat. I find it to be very, very difficult and destabilizing, and not in a good way. So I've actually swapped this back over to just doing a normal barbell squat, but I've noticed that by just having 45 pounds on either side and having the weight a lot lower, it definitely ended up activating my legs a lot more than I expected. So ignoring the picture that we see here, we're actually doing a box jump. And I'll try and find the footage of it and insert it into the video, but this is essentially what a box jump is going to be. Most of all, I really, really like this exercise just for the sake of the explosiveness of it. It's going to end up training athleticism. And generally speaking, it's not going to end up being lifting super duper heavy weights, but I find it to be really, really good for my legs. Then we're going to do a lever seated calf raise. These we can end up lifting considerably heavy. Well, considerably for the calf raise anyways. And after my bike ride that I ended up doing like a couple weeks ago, and maybe it was just a week ago, I don't know, but I ended up essentially going on like a 5-hour bike ride with my brother. And I noticed that my butt and my glutes were super duper weak. I didn't realize how out of shape that muscle group was. And so I've been adding in the barbell hip thrust, which has really, really helped not only with the activation of those muscles, but is going to end up helping me with a lot of the other lifts as well. So then we got some extra arm stuff with a lever preacher curl, where we're going to end up supersetting that with a tricep extension. This is going to end up being the 777, which essentially means that we are going to end up doing 7 halfway. And, you know, that's the whole rep, right? Up to 7. And then when we hit the first 7, we start from this position and now do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then once we end up getting through that, we end up doing a full range of motion 7. And it's going to end up being the exact same with the tricep as well. And then finally, the ab exercise is going to end up being the sliding tuck, which is kind of the reversal of what this picture is. If you can imagine that your arms are actually going to end up being static as if you're in a lifted push-up position. And then essentially what you're going to do is take your shoes off, make sure that you got some nice slippery socks, and you're going to end up kind of sweeping your legs under you and then kind of going into a sideways position. I'll try and find an image or a video as best as I can to end up representing the exercise. Generally, it's going to end up being a really, really tough one to do right after leg day. And now we're on to the last day, which is going to end up being another arm day. That's right. I do 2 exercises arm day, 2 exercises arm day. So this one is going to end up being one of my favorite. Most of all because a lot of these exercises are very new, and generally speaking, I ended up learning this set from a actual bodybuilder, which was really, really cool. So we end up doing an easy barbell with a long stretch. And essentially what we're doing is we do that on the bench until we end up feeling the burn. And then we're going to end up swapping that over to still in the same set, dropping the barbell to your nose and then lifting it back up. And then once we end up doing the full amount of reps for that, we end up doing an easy barbell with your elbows out. So it's essentially going to end up being kind of the same as a chest press, right? But the point is that you still have a nice close grip for the tricep, and you're going to end up having those elbows out and doing it nice, slow, and controlled with a final burnout of the cable push down. And that again is going to end up being a superset. So you're going to do every single one of those exercises all in a row for a total of 3 sets. Then we've kind of got a little bit of a cool down where we end up doing a kettlebell floor tricep extension, which I'm actually not using a kettlebell anymore. I'm actually just using dumbbells for this. And now we're on to the bicep exercise. This is one of my favorites, but also really, really painful, which is going to end up being another big boy superset where we're going to end up doing an easy barbell spider curl. So essentially we're leaning over on, you know, with the mat kind of holding our arm, and we're going to end up doing, again, like I said, super supinated grip. As I mentioned with the easy curl. And so you kind of do a really exaggerated lean forward. We're going to do that as our spider curl. And then even though it says a lever preacher curl, we're actually still going to be using the easy barbell, but now we're in the position as if we were doing a lever preacher curl. So the first one is actually a standing one where you're kind of like this, and then we move to sitting down while still using the same, you know, the same incline in front of us. And then we end up moving into a stance of a barbell curl, again, still using the easy curl for the entirety of this set. And as mentioned, it's a superset. So you're gonna do 1, 2, 3, all 3 exercises in a row, and then you're gonna take your break, and then you're gonna do it again for a total of 3 sets. Then we got another little extra superset, which is going to end up being a face pull. Again, it's not using a band, we are using a cable. And then we're gonna do a cable standing shoulder external rotation exercise as the superset with it, just for the sake of saving time. And finally ending with another swiper crunch, which we ended up explaining a bit earlier. So I know that this was a bit of a longer video than expected. Most of all, it's because I wanted to give you guys the entirety of my workouts, because I'm very, very happy with where my workouts are right now. It took me a very, very long time to get to this point. Basically, for the first 30 days, I was doing my old workouts, and then I ended up changing it to something similar to this, but I was slowly going through the motions of slowly tweaking and adjusting and picking and choosing the exercises that I wanted to. And that's why I didn't end up having an updated video for you guys at the 60-day mark and instead skipped to the 90-day mark. But I hope you found this video helpful. You can definitely try all these exercises for yourselves if you want. The only difference is that if you're not used to doing it every single day, you might want to end up having some break days in between. But generally speaking, it is a really, really solid workout, and it definitely is showing more results than the first 30 days of my exercises. Generally though, of course, a lot of what you're seeing with my transformation, if you want to call it that, is that I'm burning a lot more body fat than I was before. Either way, I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, smash like, sub for more, buy the merch. I'm not wearing any merch. Aha, yes I am. Buy the merch you want to support the channel, and have a wonderful day, everybody.